Hello, welcome back to my knitting podcast. My name is Juliette, I'm a PhD student and I love to knit, and here is my fourth knitting podcast episode. So, today I have a lot of things to talk about because it's actually been like 6 weeks since my last podcast episode. It's just been a bit of a busy period for my PhD, and I went to a conference and I came back and had lots of work to do, and I just kind of forgot to film my knitting podcast, which I was kind of doing it on a fortnightly basis. So yeah, it's been about 6 weeks, which means that I have a lot of things to talk about today. So I've got 2 finished objects and then 5 whips to talk about. Yeah, I've been on a bit of a whip period of like just kind of working on a lot of things at the same time. So yeah, lots of things to talk about today. So the first finished object I'm going to talk about today is my PhD vest. Actually, let me put it on. So I usually wear my first finished object on my podcast, so I thought it would be nice to wear my PhD vest, especially because this is my own pattern. So this is a quite oversized vest. So as you can see, it's quite like big. I've already got yarn pulled here. It's got like 20 centimeters of positive ease. I really like to wear this with like a collared button-down shirt. I think like kind of the flowy oversized shirt with this oversized vest and like a pair of jeans work really nicely, but it can also be worn with a t-shirt as well. So this is actually my own pattern based on a vest that I thrifted that I like the kind of look of. So I tried to mimic the similar measurements using my own knitting pattern, and I also kind of always wanted to make my own pattern and publish it. And so I'm currently looking for testers if you're interested in applying. I'm particularly looking for testers in sizes M to P. And yeah, I'll leave the sign up form in the description box below. So let's start with the pattern. So yeah, the pattern is my own design and it's worked top down, where you first work the back panel and you have these you have this drop shoulder construction which creates this lovely seam at the back. And so you work the back up until under the underarms, where there's also underarm shaping. And then you work the front right and left pieces, which you join for the v-neck. And then you also work armhole increases at the same time until you join the back and front together to work the rest of the body and around. And then you work the edges, so the collar and the armhole edges. So it's a pretty simple pattern. I'd say it's very beginner friendly. The most difficult thing about it might just be the central decrease stitch that you do for the v-neck kind of seam here. Otherwise, pretty beginner friendly. And it's actually quite a pattern that uses not very much yarn. So if you're at an awkward amount of yarn in your stash, not quite enough to make a jumper, but a bit too much to make, say, a top or something, I think a vest is a really good in between for using up that awkward amount of stash yarn that you may have. So yeah, as I said, pattern will be in testing very soon. The deadline that I set for it for now is 15th of August, with the idea that I can release it for back to school time. Because I don't know if I said this pattern is called the PhD vest because I'm a PhD student. So yeah, the yarn that I use for this sample is the Colormart merino wool. That's just kind of like a normal DK weight yarn, but it's knitted in 4.5mm needles to achieve like a 19 stitch gauge. So it's actually quite fast to knit up, and the result is this garment that has like a slightly kind of gapy stitches, not as dense as a normal DK weight garment. So it's quite flowy, very supple material in the end. I'm quite happy with the Colormart yarn. So with Colormart, yarn cones, because they're full of spinning oil, you're supposed to wash them a particular way to get rid of the spinning oils. So you put them in like really hot water when you first block the garment after you're done knitting it. And it has to be water that's like as hot as you can handle before you start like feeling like it's too hot. And you put dish soap in it, which I feel like those two, like hot water and dish soap, things like the last thing you want to do with knitwear, but you've got to trust the process. That's how you've got to deal with usually like yarn in a cone because of the spinning oil. And so doing that essentially strips your yarn of any remaining spinning oil, which means that after you block it this way, your yarn blooms and softens immensely. So when I was looking at my vest as I was knitting it up versus now, it's like it's made such a difference with this blocking method. So I'm really happy with how soft and supple my yarn is now compared to when it was just knitted up. So yeah, that's the usual recommendation that's given for cone yarn, and I would suggest doing the same. I've already had a friend who told me that made a massive difference in their cone yarn garments, because they had blocked it as they usually would with like cold water and wool detergent. That process doesn't remove the spinning oil basically, whereas this hot water and dish soap method does. But you only need to do it once when you block it for the first time ever. After that, because there's no spinning oil to kind of protect the yarn, essentially you've got to wash and block it like you usually would with cold water, minimal agitation, and wool or soft detergent. So if you're interested in knitting up this pattern, you can either sign up for testing, or the pattern will be released around the end of August. So yeah, stay tuned. So my next finished object is socks for my mother. So I think I've mentioned in some previous podcasts that I felt like a really bad daughter because I hadn't finished my mum's Christmas gift, which were a pair of knitted socks. And I took that project with me when I went on the conference to Copenhagen, and I finished it then. So that's great. And I was telling her I can post it to her to Singapore because that's where she's based, but she said that she'll wait until she sees me in September because postage is too expensive anyway. So yeah, at least my present for her, even though I haven't given it yet, is done, and she knows that it's done, and she's already really happy from what she's seen in the pictures. So the knitted socks are made from the Mountain Walk Chunky pattern by Florence Miller, or handmade by Florence. So like, what is it? It's my fourth thing by Florence that I've knitted up this year. So that's quite, yeah, I've been having quite a Florence heavy 2024 knitting year. So that's quite interesting. So we talk about the pattern first, it's a very simple DK weight socks pattern, which features these mock cables. So they're like these 1x1 cables that you don't need a cable needle for, because you just do some like, was it like cable to the right, cable to the left? But yeah, it's this method that you use for changing the order of your needles as the stitches, as you would for when you're doing actual cables, by doing like knit two togethers or like knit two togethers through the back loop and stuff like that. So that, yeah, the idea is that you get these cable looking lines without ever having to need an actual like cable spare needle. So it's quite useful, and it's quite fast as well. So it's this mix of 2x2 knitting and these mock cables, which means that the socks are quite stretchy. And so I think they're a good pattern for gifting to someone, because like ribbed sock patterns tend to be quite stretchy, and therefore it accommodates the fact that your like gift receiving person's foot might be more or less big. Yeah, there's just a bit more stretch in the socks when they have some ribbing element throughout the socks, which means that it makes sure that it fits most people. So that's why I went for this pattern, and also because it's quite cute with the mock knit cables. And I replaced the heel flap and gusset construction for the heel with just the fish lips kiss heel. And I think my mom tried one sock when it was ready, in Christmas, and it fitted her really well. I know that Fish Lips Kiss heel can sometimes cause a bit of trouble with fit around the heel or around the ankle, but it seemed to have been fine with her. So yeah, and the yarn I used is actually a fingering weight sock yarn that I held double to make a DK gauge. I didn't particularly enjoy knitting with 2 strands of fingering weight yarn to make a DK pair of knitted socks. I think next time I'll ever do DK weight socks, I'll just stick to a DK weight yarn. I didn't like the fact that it was quite splitty essentially, and also like quite tight. Like I think the gauge when you hold 2 fingering weight yarns is a bit tighter than when you have just a DK weight yarn. So the yarn I used is a hand-dyed yarn from Emma's Yarn. I think it's called Practically Perfect Sock, and in the color Sweet Magnolia, which is this really pretty kind of slightly variegated, mostly tonal pink. So yeah, that was really enjoyable, the color, and I think my mother really enjoys that color as well. Right, so those were my 2 finished objects in the last 6 weeks. So moving on to works in progress. So the first one I want to mention is actually another test knit for Florence. I've got it here. It's my 3rd test knit for Florence. I really enjoy her stuff. So the test knit that I'm doing for Florence this time around is the mixed rib camisole. So you can kind of see it here. Is this really pretty boat neck ribbed top that features a bit of twisted ribbing as well as normal kind of flat wide rib that creates this really interesting repeating rib pattern. So it's slightly more interesting than, say, if you were doing just like 2x2 knitting, but it's simple enough that you really get into the rhythm of doing this mix of twisted and flat rib. So I'm knitting mine up in Sandnes Garn Sunday, and the color 6050 Above the Clouds, and it gives off this really pretty dusty light blue, which I think I heard is very similar to Dusty Dove Blue by Knitting for Olive. So yeah, really looking forward to having this top. I'm actually quite close to being done, so maybe I'll do another like 10 centimeters on the body, and then I'll be done with my top, I reckon. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the ribbing pattern on this top is like really addictive. So like a lot of test knitters have already finished, in particular the smaller size test knitters, but yeah, I think it's like surprisingly quick to knit up because the pattern is very easy to remember, and you just kind of really get into the rhythm with it. And there's also features some waist shaping that's optional, that goes along the side of the body. And yeah, as I mentioned, the neckline is just kind of like a boat neck, flat, quite shallow neck. So I'm really looking forward to wearing this top. I think it's the first time I'm knitting up a summer top well ahead of like hot summer days, which means that when it gets warm, I'll be immediately be ready to wear this top. So I'm quite looking forward to that. And also I've been thinking that I could knit a second one of this because I do have 2 balls of Sandnes Garn Sunday in the lilac color that I used for knitting my Mabel wrap. So yeah, that was excess from just having bought a bit more than I needed for my Mabel wrap test knit for Florence. So I'm thinking, yeah, it would be really cute to have this in the lilac color as well. And wouldn't that be so cute to have 2 of these tops? I'm thinking of knitting a second one because I think, like, as soon as I saw this top on Florence's Instagram, I was like, this is a bit of me. I really like the style. I would definitely wear this loads. Also because it looks like it's quite bra strap friendly, and I think this is something that I'm really going to be looking out for in any future summer top patterns that I knit up. Because, for example, I've got my camisole number 5, which I really enjoy, but I don't feel like I wear it enough, and I think the main reason why is because of the bra situation, which is a bit complicated because of that kind of halter looking top. So yeah, I think I'll just stick to things that are bra friendly to make sure that I get a lot of wear out of them. So the next work in progress that I can talk about today is my Cumulus tee. So I feel like I've got quite a lot of progress done since the last time I talked about this on my knitting podcast. I actually think that either one of these markers, probably the bottom one, corresponds to when I last talked about. So I've got a decent amount of progress on this Cumulus tee, which, yeah, if you watched the previous podcast episode, I remembered I mentioned how much of how much time it takes me to kind of get progress into this, because it's fingering weight yarn, but like unlike the, sorry, I'm quite sniffly. Unlike the, Mabel, unlike the mixed rib camisole, which is knitted in pure merino, this is knitted in Knitting for Olive pure silk, which is quite splitty, and it has quite a lot of grip on needles, and it's not nearly as smooth of a knitting experience as it is with knitting with wool. Therefore, I feel like that's the main reason why it's been quite a slow progress. But I mentioned in my Instagram stories how another reason why I didn't really like working on it was because my needles were not really right for the pure silk. I was using some Adi metal needles that were frankly like awful for pure silk. They were squeaking like acrylic squeaks so much, and it really kind of like itched the wrong part of my brain, and yeah, I disliked it a lot. And then I heard that bamboo needles were quite good for working with silk. I'm still a bit overexposed. Yeah, I heard that bamboo needles were quite good for working with pure silk, so I took that opportunity to buy some CNet needles because they're quite famous. I heard really good things about them. So I got these Koshitsu needles, which are I think the more premium ones from CNet, that are made from stronger bamboo that is coated with wax. So they're more durable than the shirotake needles, which are more pliable, but yeah, that's durable apparently. I wanted to make sure I got the stronger ones for small needles, like 3mm needles, because I've previously broken wooden 3mm needles, and so I didn't want to repeat that experience, especially for CNet needles, which are quite, a bit more expensive than average. So since switching needles, I've been having such a blast. I mean, no, okay, let's not. Maybe I won't exaggerate things. I still don't. This is not my favorite thing to knit on, but definitely made way more progress thanks to the switch of needles. So I think I switched needles a couple days ago, and you can see it here because it's right around when I run out of yarn from the previous ball. So in the span of 2 days, I've knit about 5 centimeters on this, which is, quite a good amount of knitting. And I only have about 5 centimeters left before I think I've reached my optimal body length for the Cumulus tee. So yeah, very happy to have made quite a bit of progress thanks to the switch of needles on this. And hopefully by the next podcast, this should be done. In fact, I'm hoping for this to be done by the coming week so I can start wearing it, because the weather has been pretty good for something like a Cumulus tee. So yeah. Now the third, which one should I show first? The third work in progress that I have to show you today is actually it could have been considered as a kind of half-finished project, but it's these socks. So this is a sock pattern by Yuka, which is featured on the book 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2. And it's this really pretty cabled pattern with these crisscrossing center diamonds, and then these kind of mock cables on the side. And it's such a cute pattern. This is a super cute pattern it's my first time knitting a Yuka pattern. I can really see why she's very popular. The design is really beautiful and the instructions are quite clear as well. This is a toe up pattern and I really enjoyed it. Really cute socks, which I need to do the second sock of. I'm deep into second sock syndrome. I knitted this about 3 weeks ago in a span of 4 days and then completely gave up on starting the second one. So I still have all of this left to do the second sock, which I'm thinking I'll do. Yeah, I'll try to cast this on after this podcast is filmed, just to get it started. Because once you've got your socks cast on, the second socks cast on, I think it does go by a lot quicker than you'd think to knit up the second sock. So the biggest hurdle of second sock syndrome is just casting on that second sock, I think. So this is knitted up in hand-dyed yarn called Market Town Yarns. It's sold at Yarnworks, which is a knitting shop in Hadley. It's a really cute independent shop that actually has a lot of like European yarn brands, a really good selection of them, as well as Emma's Yarn, which is a hand-dyed yarn, which I've mentioned before. That's what I use for my mum's socks. And then this is their new house hand-dyed yarn called Market Town Yarns, and I'm actually one of the subscribers of their monthly yarn package, which so this is actually the April yarn, and I've already shown this yarn in a podcast before. It's the one that I kind of referred to as daffodil yarn because that's what the colors reminded me of, and April was just around a time where all those daffodils were flowering as well. So the variegation is really nice, and I think it's still soft enough and a light color enough that the cables are really obvious and displayed nicely, while still adding a bit of interesting charm about this pattern by having this color variegation. So really cute. I think these socks will be adorable with loafers or my Mary Janes. Yeah, really enjoying this. I initially thought I'd make a knitted top out of this, but I was just seeking some what I call knitting dopamine. I was a bit ill when I knitted this and I just wanted a quick project, and yeah, dopamine knitting with dopamine providing colors and pattern. So yeah, really recommend this hand dyeing yarn, especially because I really like the fact that I'm buying hand dyed yarn from a local business. So Hadley's only about an hour away from Cambridge. I've been to their shop in person before. I intend to go back there quite soon, and the people holding the shop are very lovely. And yeah, I think I like the idea of getting this yarn subscription from a local hand dyer business. So yeah, check them out if you can. So the fourth work in progress that I can show you today, where have I put it? Oh, it's here. So this is my Cumulus blouse. So I'm knitting the Cumulus tee and the Cumulus blouse. So apologies if you can't really see much of it here because I've got it on circular needles that are frankly a bit too short given the circumference of the garment. But yeah, you can see that I've split for sleeves, which is great. At the last knitting podcast, I think I had freshly cast this on, and since then I finished the v-neck shaping and I've split for sleeves, and now I'm working on the body. This is knit up in Camaro's Midnight Soul, which I was gifted by my best friend and her partner, who's also a very good friend of mine, for my birthday a while ago. So this is the color, what was it? Lys Puder, there we go, which is this really cute shade of pink. And now I've finished using the pink up and I'm knitting the second color, sorry, which is Lys Puder. So I'm doing like kind of bit of a color block situation where I have Lys Puder, this beige color, and then for the end of the garment, Lys Brune, which is a light muted brown color that's like very tonally similar to this, but just like a darker version of this. So yeah, I freshly started the Lys Beige here on the body. I've done some maths to make sure that I have enough yarn left to do the sleeve for the same like length, number of rows as the body. So hopefully my math works out so that all the color blocking on the sleeve matches that of the body, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not sure. I thought this project will go faster than it actually is, and I think it's because I expected it to go quite fast given that it's knitted on 5mm needles to meet gauge for myself. But actually, again, it's kind of similar to the Pure Silk experience. It's not the smoothest knitting experience. I'm not knitting as fast using 2 strands of Midnight Soul than I am usually. Like, I'm not reaching the usual speed that I have with normal wool or wool and lace weight mohair like combination. I don't know. I think the grip is just a bit different if I have 2 strands of lace weight fluff together, you know? So yeah, not going as fast as I thought it would be, but that's just part of the process, I guess. I'm really liking the garment so far, and so I'm hoping I'm not sure if I'll get to wear this season because it's already getting quite warm. But it will still be nice to have like a lightweight jumper, maybe for like summer evenings where I just want to put something over my shoulders, or just a light jumper when it's getting cold in the evening. It might be that this is a good jumper to throw on in these occasions. So I'll still make sure to finish this season. I'm saying this because there's other stuff that I'm not intending to finish this season. But yeah, hopefully I can get some work, some more progress done on this. The fact that I've used that one color means that I'm kind of a third way through, because sleeves usually go quite quickly. So yeah, that's, I guess, a good motivator. I'm like a third done with this project. So the 5th work in progress that I want to mention today is actually something that has never appeared in this knitting podcast, and it's not really seasonally appropriate, but I've recently picked it up again. So it's actually my Moby sweater, which I was convinced I would have finished this past winter, but because I had those kind of those test knits, so like the fennel seed jacket and the Maybole wrap, both by Florence Miller, that kind of crept up. I ended up signing up for and ended up getting and, had to knit. I just didn't have the time to finish this quite large winter project. So I decided that I'll just kind of keep knitting on it very slowly over the summer, with the hopes that over the next 3 months, so June, July, August, I can get this done, so that by the time it gets cold in September, October, I'll have, a new jumper to wear, which I think is quite exciting. Because I think I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's fine to knit jumpers over warmer seasons, because then I think this was like 2 Pearls in a Pod that mentioned this. You knit a jumper over the summer, and then you don't necessarily get to wear it immediately, but then that means that as soon as the cooler seasons start, you have like a brand new garment, and you get this feeling of having just recently purchased a jumper. And that really works well with the whole idea of slowing down with fast fashion, So like the feeling of novelty that you typically get from buying a garment from a store is kind of emulated by knitting up a jumper ahead of time, so that when you do get to wear, you have that novelty feeling as well of like, oh wow, I suddenly have a new jumper, you know? So I think with that idea in mind, I would really like to knit on this during the summer. I think it'd also be quite a good palette cleanser between, you know, knitting up very small gauge stuff. And I also, you know, sometimes I just want to knit with like nice hardy wool. And so speaking of that, let's talk about the yarn that I'm using. So this is knitted up in Sandnes Garn Purgen, which I think is the #1 yarn that's used for this Moby sweater pattern by most people, because it's the recommended yarn. And I'm really enjoying this. I've already used Purgen in the past. I've made my partner's Oslo hat with it, and I really enjoyed it. So it's a rustic wool that really softens up when you block it. I've seen it on my partner's hat. I've seen it with the swatch that I made for this. Washing really does soften Purgen. So I'm really looking forward to having a really nice, big, you know, cabled jumper that will soften over time and will be very durable as well. That's the main feedback that you hear from Purgen, is that it kind of lasts you a lifetime, essentially. Like people on Ravelry, on the comments for the Purgen, mention how they've had a jumper knitted in this for like 15 years and it still looks good as new. So it might feel like a bit rough at first, a bit rustic, but apparently it's supposed to like get better and better over time, and also whenever you block and wash and block it, it also massively softens up. So I'm really happy with how the Purgen is turning out for this pattern, because the stitch definition is really good. Like the cables really pop on here. So the Moby sweater is a very popular pattern by Petite Knit that features these beautiful cable patterns, vertical panels in the back, in the front and the back. And it's a drop shoulder construction. As you can see, there's kind of a sloping edge here. And it's got these moss stitch, double moss stitch pattern on the side. And yeah, just like it's I thought it would be quite challenging at first. This is like my first cabled jumper pattern, but actually, I mean, the cables repeat, you know, where they repeat. So the pattern's really easy to remember after a while. And so I don't need to look at the cabled chart or like written instructions for each of these cabled sections anymore. You just do what you see as you're knitting. And yeah, so I think I got this done quite quickly, but then I just kind of didn't pick it up again because of those like test knitting deadlines. But I think if it hadn't been for that, I probably would have finished this over like 2 months during the winter time. So really enjoying this pattern. I'm making it deliberately a bit bigger than the suggested 15 centimeter positive ease. I think I'm going for 25 centimeters of positive ease, and I think the reason why is because I really want the look of a huge cabled jumper that is just so cozy and like with the long sleeves and long body, and yeah, very oversized. And so also I heard on different podcasts, as well as I read on Ravelry, that people tended to say that they wish they had sized up on the jumper. So I went up 2 sizes essentially to make sure that I have enough ease. And I'm also knitting this up on 4.5mm needles, because I think with the 4mm needles I was barely meeting gauge, and it was definitely on the smaller side of the gauge, and I wanted to make sure that like I was definitely making this larger than smaller. So like with 4.5mm needles, I meet gauge, and like my swatch is maybe slightly too big, but I'd rather this being a bit too big than too small. Because if something's too small, then it's a bit disappointing. Whereas if something's too big, I like an oversized look, so I would definitely wear it as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to working on this throughout the summer. So it will be slow progress for sure. But I'm thinking that like if I try to do one of these cables a week, then I'll definitely be done by the summer, or at least I'll be done with the body by the end of the summer, and then the sleeves will knit up pretty quickly because that's how sleeves usually go. I can usually get to both sleeves done in a week. So I know that this is a cable pattern, so it might still be a bit slower, but the pure gin and the 4.5mm needle mean that the large gauge is probably going to quicken by my like knitting time, right? I'm so looking forward to having this jumper. I think it's going to be a great staple in my wardrobe, and I mean the green is really lovely. This color, I'll put it in the description and I'll put it up on the screen. I can't remember the name, but it's like, it's a green that has like quite yellow undertone. I was initially hoping for a green that had more blue undertones, but I think this is still very nice regardless. And yeah, I love green. I love like green jumpers and green garments. So yeah, really looking forward to this. And I'm actually wondering if people would be interested in a knit along of the Moby sweater over the summer, because I have another knitting friend who's also like has a work in progress Moby sweater that they didn't have the time to finish over the winter, and like we're saying, oh, we should knit this over the summer together and like just kind of have it ready for winter. And I was wondering if people would be interested in that, widening the participation a bit more. Like if would people be interested in doing a knit along of their kind of half started knit Moby sweater, or just start a Moby sweater now over the summer to like have it done for the autumn. Yeah, just like let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a knit along of the Moby sweater over the summer. Or actually, if people are from the southern hemisphere, then it's just winter right now, so we could do a Moby sweater together because, I mean, it's cold weather for them anyway. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, basically, if I should do it knit along. So if there's enough interest, maybe I'll do a better announcement on Instagram and also do an announcement here on YouTube. And yeah, my first knit along will be quite fun, I think. So the last thing I want to talk about today is a small acquisition. So previously I had shown some tin pure gint from Sandnes Garn that I had purchased to do what I called porcelain 2.0. And so recently I acquired the matching mohair to go with them. And yeah, I can show it. So Filcola Atelier, if you'd seen my previous podcast, has grown to become by far my favorite mohair. I mean, to be honest, I haven't tried very many, but it's definitely a staple mohair for me now. And it's also like a reasonably priced mohair, so not as cheap as Drops, but it's a bit cheaper than, say, Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair or Issachar soft silk mohair. And so I bought these mohairs to match these pure gints. And I can actually show you the swatch that I made. So this is the swatch that I made for Porcelain 2.0. So it's gonna have this green background with the white contrast color work, and I think it turned out so well, and I'm actually really happy with how this combination has worked up together into the swatch, because the tin Birkin is a very full fingering weight yarn that's quite like hearty, like kind of same aspects, same specs as the Birkin, which I really enjoy in the fingering weight version. And I was wondering whether it might be a bit rough, but actually knitted up with Filcola Atelier, it's like such a dream, and it bloomed and softened really nicely with washing. So really looking forward to making Porcelain 2.0. I'll probably start knitting it in September, but I was bored the other day doing my summer knitting, and therefore I was like, why don't I swatch since I have the yarn, and then I can look at this swatch and look forward to September, where I'll start knitting on Porcelain 2.0. So yeah, really looking forward to this. This is such a nice swatch. I think, yeah, I mean, there's clearly a theme going on of green, right, in my channel. But actually, something that's maybe worth noting is that, well, first of all, the Folklore Atelier colors that I got are 124 and 100. And the 100, as you can see, is like a true icy white. And it actually toned down the yellowness of the white tin Peer Gynt, so that the swatch really looks like just normal true white on the contrast color, because I was worried that the yellowness will come through from the tin Peer Gynt. But yeah, these two combined together really made a very neutral white, which is good. And then similarly, the green from tin Peer Gynt, this is the color A082, which is quite, kind of a blue tone green, has become further blue toned with this mohair, which kind of slightly veers on the blue. It's like a bluish green, So yeah, really happy with my yarn choice. So this concludes my 4th knitting podcast. Hopefully I won't leave so much time between this podcast and the next one, but I hope you enjoyed all the different projects that I had to share with you today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel and leave a like or comment below. I would really appreciate those. And thank you for watching today's podcast, and see you next time.